The Pride of the Yankees with Gary Cooper.
I would definitely choose It Happened One Night.
There's so many memorable scenes in City Lights.
Double Indemnity, you still hear about that, like even like in TV shows.
Mrs. Miniver.
The first film that would come to mind would probably be Snow White.
My Man Godfrey.
Babyface.
I definitely think The Maltese Falcon.
For me, it would be Frankenstein.
A lot of the Hollywood moguls of the time were actually immigrants from Europe, and this is where they found their streets of gold. As we learned when we were growing up, that America, the streets are paved with gold, and some of these Hollywood moguls found that out. Goldwyn was an independent. He actually broke off from the MGM group and went independent. Samuel Goldwyn didn't want to go with the baseball. He says, if you want to know about baseball, go to a baseball game. But he sat down and he watched Lou Gehrig's speech, where he says,
I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
When he actually heard Lou Gehrig's speech, he cried, and he said, go by the story. He can relate to what Lou Gehrig was saying, because that's exactly how Samuel Goldwyn felt about his life in the movie business. He felt like he was a lucky man, that being in America was like a gift from God.
I would definitely choose It Happened One Night. What I think made it so special was it was one of the first movies to win all 5 Academy Awards, which it's still, even now today, is not really something that you hear of. It was kind of like a happy-go-lucky film where in the time being it was during the Great Depression. Also during that time was when the Hays Codes were implemented, so they also kind of poke fun at it a little bit when they reference like the walls of Jericho. There's a sheet up in more in the middle of the movie.
We should take those things off the walls of Jericho.
And then at the end of the movie, when they get married, the last scene is literally the sheet falling down.
I think for me it would be Frankenstein. Universal Studios did a really great job with that, because it was after the Depression where everyone was kind of just like, meh, life kind of just went downhill. And this kind of offered an escape into like a new genre that wasn't really explored at the time. In a particular scene when they created life, Dr. Frankenstein, who, by the way, I thought Frankenstein was a monster, and it's not. So that's something really cool. I always thought that Frankenstein was the monster, and, well, reality check, it's actually the doctor. It's kind of an escape of reality. Like, there's so much ugliness going on in the world, and taking Frankenstein, for example, when something ends, especially like after the Great Depression years before that, it's kind of like, you know what, we can flourish, we can move on, we can kind of bring light into the world. And it was kind of like a way for them to move away from their daily lives and just see something that's different and something cool and innovative at that time.
Yeah, she starts out as being a prostitute, basically. Her father, uses her to start gaining money, and she decides to quit him.
Swell start you gave me. Ever since I was 14, what's it been? Nothing but men, dirty, rotten men, and you're lower than any of them. I'll hate you as long as I live.
And she doesn't stop using her appeal, her baby face. So she uses it to her advantage, definitely. I thought that the restrictions and such that were placed on films in that era started way earlier than when they did. So I didn't expect to see that from a film in the 30s.
I like the costumes and like all the type of stuff. It does resonate with today. I love when Ginger wasn't dressed in the dress. I love when she was like in that pantsuit. Like it kind of showed like a strong woman, and I like really like respected that, and that she would take the lead in like some of the choreography. Like I really like enjoyed that a lot. Like I think it showed a lot of power in not only her character but her as an actress. My grandmother, she went to the High School of Performing Arts in the city. She was a dancer and everything, so it really like, it makes me like just, it reminds me of my grandmother in a sort of way. Like just watching it made me so happy. Like I don't know why, like it just like, I don't know. Like, I could watch that movie over and over for no reason.
Mrs. Miniver was one of the movies that was during the time of the World War II, and it showed a scene where they had to live outside of their house in like a tent, in a sense, where it had a lot of sand underneath, so all the bombs that were dropping wouldn't drop on them and their kids. This is real life. Like, this is happening. Even though this is a movie, it's actually happening. The ending scene of the church being half ripped and them still worshiping and praying for better days, that's actually happening. And especially that is happening back in like the early 2000s when we was at war with Iraq. This is actually happening. When the Twin Towers fell, it's actually happening. You know, we live through these things, and these movies show that.
Clark Gable, for sure. Honestly, he's good looking. He's like the Channing Tatum of that time period. I feel like that's the best way to put him. Like, he's just kind of like, he's like romantic, but like serious, but like nice. Like, you want to know him, kind of person.
He starred in 67 different movies. What else about him? He also, how do I say this? One thing about him that they said was, they told him he would never be like a leading man in a role because he had big ears. So basically that was one thing against him. But then he ended up becoming like the biggest star in Hollywood at the time. And he was called the king of the golden age, actually.
After it happened one night, because he was never part of Columbia Pictures, he was borrowed. So even I think just him getting borrowed and then back to, I believe it was MGM. After that, he was just very popular. People wanted to see his face, so I think just that kind of just brought him to, he was everywhere. They're relatable. You can still watch them and feel the same way that the audience felt back when they were released. I feel like it's a constant, if it's a good story, you can relate it to any time period. And that's how those characters, and how you portray those characters, it just makes it everlasting.
I think it's Judy Garland. For me, the era was more of like Shining Bright, being like a poster for what people wanted to be at that time. And when Judy Garland had came out, she was very big on roles that were like Girl Next Door, very like, she wasn't like the best looking actress at the time, but they made her look so innocent and sweet that people kind of wanted to like embody that. In The Wizard of Oz, she was the lead role in that. It was magical, it was beautiful, it was crazy. Something at that time, it was something that, you know, they can follow that yellow brick road and go into something majestic. And she kind of had that. She had that ability to bring you to a different world. She was great in singing, she was pretty. Maybe not to the studio themselves, because they wanted, you know, like blonde and beautiful, but she wasn't blonde or beautiful. Personally, what got me into her was Meet Me in St. Louis, which I think was done in like the late 40s. It was kind of an escape of during the war. It was nice and bright in color. Judy Garland was finally given a film where she was an adult. You know, they always dressed her up as like a child. And when she was first hired by MGM, they didn't really know what to do with her. She was kind of like too big for the younger actors, but too young for the older actors. So in this movie, she was given like a older role. She was dressed nicer. They made her look pretty, and she was given like 3 songs that she kind of like sang really well. Like the trolley song, that's my favorite song.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell. Zing, zing, zing went my heartstrings. From the moment I saw him, I fell.
I probably listen to it like once a month. It's a really cool song. But yeah, she kind of like helped people like, oh, you know, there is like beauty after this. I think it was during the war, which is why it was kind of ugly. And at that time, like that film was just so bright and beautiful. And yeah, I think that kind of like helped her star into being an adult instead of just like a child.
The golden age was a time when the movie industry, it boomed, it flourished, they introduced sound film, and that sort of changed the whole game. It's a time, you know, there was a lot of things happening in the history of the country, of you know, the Great Depression and World War II and the Hollywood blacklist and all that sort of thing.
could even do like Gone with the Wind. I don't know why I didn't even think of Gone with the Wind. Even something like that where it's so like love story, it's relatable love story where he goes away but he comes back, and you just it's the stories where you want to see like them come back together.
Yeah.